I'm Malcolm Fleming, I'm the town administrator, and unless any commission members object, until you decide who your chair is going to be, I'll facilitate the meeting until we get to that stage. And the first order of business is to call the meeting to order. So we'll call the meeting of the Erie Home Rule Commission, first meeting, December 1st, 2022. Call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to do the roll call.
Well, actually, I'm going to do it since I'll be here for the other meetings. So if I destroy anybody's name, just let me know how to. So Ashraf Sheikh, did I do it right?
Yes.
Okay.
I go by Ash as well.
Ash? Oh, that is even easier. Okay. Sarah Cornley.
I'm here.
Chelsea Campbell.
That's me.
Brian O'Connor.
Here.
Lisa Cunningham.
Here.
Bob Broaddus. Adam Haig.
Here.
Candace Whitehouse.
Here.
And Ben Hemphill.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
We have a quorum. So the first order of business is to approve the agenda. If you have any changes you want to make to the agenda, otherwise I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Broaddus and seconded by Haig. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Next is public comment. And we've got at least one member of the public here. Any public comments?
I'm here to listen as a resident of the community, so but I appreciate all of your service that you're providing to the town. So thank you.
All right. Next is general business. So first off, I want to welcome all of you and thank you for your service to the community. You were all, I would say, the bedrock of democracy in stepping up to craft a home rule charter for the voters of Erie to consider. Thank you. And especially thank you for the next at least 6 months of service. It's a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, and I'm sure you're up to it, so thank you. Let's do some introductions. Maybe just go around the table is the easiest way. So I'm Malcolm Fleming, Town Administrator, and I'll hand it off to Hillary.
Hi, I'm Hillary Graham. I work with the same firm as the town attorney, and I have a bit of a specialty with home rule charters. It's been, it'll probably be my 6th or 7th that I've worked on, so that's why I was kind of called in for this. Happy to be of assistance, answer questions, and I think it's probably yet to be determined, but I think I'll be sort of the keeper of the official draft as we're moving along, so that's my role.
Chelsea Campbell. I'm a charter commissioner. Nice to meet you guys that I haven't met.
Ashraf Sheikh, also Charter Commissioner. Nice to meet everyone.
Lisa Cunningham, ditto.
Sarah Cornelli, also on the Charter Commission.
Candace Whitehouse, same.
Adam Haig, same.
Broaddus, same.
Brian O'Connor, I'll go for same.
Ben Hemphill, Commissioner.
I'm Melissa Wiley, I'm the Deputy Town Administrator.
I'm Amy Tietzel. I'm the Director of Administrative Services, and I'll be here at all your meetings for anything you may need logistically.
And I'm Debbie Stamp, I'm the Town Clerk.
And I'm Malcolm Fleming, again, Town Administrator. Like Hillary, I've had a little bit of experience, not with home rule charter commissions, but in my 30+ years of government service, I've worked in charter counties, a strong mayor city, a home rule city here in Colorado, and in Erie for the last 4 years, statutory town. So I'm here as much as you wish, and if you don't wish, that's fine too. I'm not trying to guide anything, but here to answer any questions you might have. So, and with that, I'm going to ask Hillary to go through the general information, if you will, unless you want me to do that. But you wrote most of it, so I would defer to you.
Yeah, and I think this was sent ahead of time, so I won't belabor it as I know you all do.
And there's extra copies, there's a couple extra
Anybody needs
copies of all of this information if anybody would like to have it.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Pass them
Well,
around.
there's only 4, so.
Oh, and if we need more, we can run up and copy more. You guys don't.
So just some foundational,
I'll share with Bob.
Yeah, I'm trying to get into the email.
You have. No, I these are
Regular, it
just.
says like Town of
Oh,
Erie
no,
minutes.
we-
Minutes.
Well, this
that's
is
the whole
it's an
package.
agenda, I'm looking for it in
It should be attached to that.
correct.
attached the email?
Yep.
No,
No,
it's attached to your agenda there.
behind the paperclip.
Yeah, this is the agenda.
No,
Keep
the other-
going, keep going. That's the letter from
It's the
Malcolm.
letter that we
Those are the
have.
things that we got
We're,
in
we're
email.
looking at
Yeah.
what we have, and we're looking for soft copies of the agenda to see if we can follow along here, because not everybody has it. So Vern does, Ben, do you have it on the agenda?
It's just the agenda.
I'll keep it because I have the general information.
Yeah, why does it say?
I just didn't have the.
Oh, you're gonna read off your-
I just didn't have the agenda, I have everything else.
Alright, are you ready? So just not knowing where you all come from as members of the public, I know some of you have experience serving the community in one capacity or the other, but this is just really foundational stuff, so your work here is public, these are public meetings. Unlike the Board of Trustees, there's no basis for executive sessions for this body, so everything you do is public. A meeting of 5 constitutes a quorum, so that 5 of you can do business if other members are absent. If there aren't 5 of you, you can simply start the meeting and reschedule for another time. You could potentially unwittingly have sort of an improper meeting if you're discussing the business of this commission outside a properly posted meeting, so we want to discourage that. All your talk of charter drafting should occur here in this room with everybody else around. And the implications of that extend to written communications, so that's email as well. Those are kind of considered offline meetings at times. So again, don't use those except for maybe scheduling issues. Contact Amy. An email to staff without reply all is perfectly acceptable, but just avoid trying to bring the group into a discussion via email. The records this body creates are open records under the Colorado Open Records Act. Probably no surprises there. The draft charter, as we're working on it, will be subject to public discussion and review. Jumping down here to officers, we're gonna ask you to elect officers. You just need a chair and a vice chair. The town will serve the other functions. Amy already mentioned she's the staff liaison. Agenda meetings and packets are gonna be put together by town staff using, is it Legistar? That's the same system that the Board of Trustee packets and boards and commissions go out on. So will the commission receive the agenda and packet ahead of time by email? Or do they have to go get it?
We'll send a link and then, we don't know that there will necessarily be any packet items. It will just be primarily what
What you're gonna talk
what
about.
topics you'll be
Yeah.
discussing in the meeting that time.
I could see if the commission says, you know, hey, can you provide some comparisons of X provision?
Gotcha. And then we would attach those?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
put that together between meetings and then
Okay.
you could send it out that way, but yeah,
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Can we bring in our own materials from our own research and stuff
For sure.
too? Okay.
Yeah, and if it's something that you're gonna want to reference and share with the group, I'd suggest you get it to Debbie or Amy.
Okay,
Amy ahead of time, so
wonderful,
that then everybody could get it distributed to them and they'd have it in electronic format.
perfect, thank
Because
you.
we're not allowed to send it directly to us.
Correct, yeah. So use the staff as sort of your go-between.
And we probably need to provide it if a core is asked for it.
Yeah, if it's become part of the packet,
Yes.
yeah.
So does the 3 people rule apply to town employees as well?
No, it's 3 people on the commission, so 3 commissioners.
Okay, so like I could send an email to Adam and Debbie, and that's okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Rules of order, we sort of generally follow loosely Robert's rules, but they can be really complex. So as long as we get to a motion in a second, I think we're good. I would doubt we need anything more than that. The commission's required by the statutes that allowed us to convene this to have 1 public hearing. Typically, that's done toward the end. when you have a mostly complete draft of the charter, and that you sort of put out there for public comment. But you can have public input at other times as well. You can hold the hearing, you can hold more than one hearing, you can hold the hearing at any point you choose, so that's really up to you. The requirement being you just need to have at least one before you refer your draft charter to the Board of Trustees.
So if I decide to have a meeting with like residents about this, that's okay as long as it's just me and residents?
Correct. If you're gathering input
Yeah,
from the
get
community.
information.
Yep. You could also encourage them to come, and then you wouldn't have to be, you wouldn't have to funnel the information, you know?
I don't know if this is an appropriate place to say this, but we have, our Director of Communications has created a form that could be used if you also chose, and we asked Hillary and if it would be acceptable, that would be on our website. We will have a web page for you guys that's the Home Rule Commission, and it would be like submit a comment, and it could be very specific. If you would like to use that, and then the information would come in and it would go to all of you, and then we would also keep it as town staff as part of your record that Joe resident or Jane resident submitted this comment to you all to consider.
I've had a request from a couple people for that.
Oh, already?
Yeah.
So
As
is
part of
that,
the campaign. in fact.
is that, if, I mean, I'm assuming, Hillary, that all of them have to agree to that, or at least a majority, or is it just something we can go ahead
I
and
think,
say
I
yes?
think it's happening.
Okay, so we will tell Gabby to, she's got it already built out. We've got it, we will have it sort of rather pointed, like, is it for a specific topic or just in general? And then you all will see all of, it'll come to you in a PDF of the form that's been filled out. So,
And each one submitted will come to us in an email?
yes, it'll be an email with a PDF attached.
Are you gonna compile them and just submit them to the commission once a meeting, or are they gonna get them on an ongoing
They can get them,
basis?
well, we can do it either way. They can get them every time somebody submits it, and so it would all go to their Town of Erie email account, or we can collect them all and submit them.
My concern with them being distributed as they come in is it might be tempting for you
To
all to
talk
have
about it?
offline, yeah,
And actually,
maybe. So, I mean, if you know you're not supposed to, I trust that you won't, but it might be better to just get them sort of with each meeting, and then you can kind of digest them as
Okay.
a group.
and I was actually thinking something more general, so I probably spoke too soon, which is like a wiki or a web page that people could see what we've been doing and put comments into that.
Oh, like the draft?
Either the draft or just general questions
Okay.
that they have. And was there a plan for a website for the commission?
You do have
There is a
it's
web-
already up.
it's-
That's all right, all right.
Yeah, and it lists you guys as commissioners.
All right, so that's what people wanted to see really, so they could give their input to that.
Well, it doesn't, that particular page so far does not allow for input, but this form would allow them to provide that input.
Fine,
And then I can bring it to each meeting and
that'll work.
distribute it.
Or
Well,
just
is there an electronic fillable form on the website for them?
There will
There
be,
will
yes.
Okay,
It's not live yet. We
Okay.
wanted,
alright,
we wanted to make sure that's what you all wanted.
yes.
And as far as like the website that we have that is for the commission, who is allowed to like edit that? That goes through you guys?
Yeah, it's just one of our pages, as any other advisory board or commission has, that lists your names, when you meet, your email address. Have their
Email addresses are on there.
And then it'll have that form, and I don't know if it's appropriate there to them. It'll have, and it will have a link to where they can find the agenda for your next meeting. Is it appropriate to have the current draft up? I don't know.
Or just any information we wanna like have provided to the public about things that we're considering for our next meeting or anything like that, so.
I'm gonna say that's probably gonna be an administrative burden. Just because the way the public is made aware of the goings on is by agendas and meetings. So to impose an additional burden on staff to kind of keep up a web page would be a lot to ask, but.
Are these meetings recorded?
They are, as a matter of fact, this one is being recorded right now.
Okay, and so that you can put links to meetings?
Yeah, they will automatically be on the agenda center with all of our other boards and commissions meetings, as will your agendas. And actually, I got a text from Gabby.
Live stream.
We're actually live streaming through YouTube right now. So anybody that and so we will put that link on your page, that if anybody wants to watch these meetings live, and assuming YouTube is cooperating, we're being streamed out into the universe right now. I will start the recordings, when the first 3 of you get in, but then we won't go live until you call to order.
Cool.
Does that cover it for everybody on that topic? Okay.
Thank you, Hillary.
Yeah, sure. This is good stuff. Computer went to sleep. I think we were on to liability. As long as you guys stick with your assigned duties, which is to draft a charter, you will not face any liability. Attendance, and then the expectation is that you'll attend every meeting. We do need to talk about when meetings will be and how frequently and days of the week and that kind of stuff. And this kind of gets to what we just covered, but social media. I think you'd be directed to work with the town's communications director to kind of coordinate what you wanted to put out there as far as social media. So the town runs a webpage, and what other platforms are you on?
I think Twitter, Facebook, I don't know.
LinkedIn.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I don't do social media, so I don't know.
Well, that could be something you guys want to think about, is what kind of presence you have.
Could we partner with like the PIO to get information put out for us if we wanted that?
Probably.
We can talk to Gabby. We can. Yeah.
All right, that's what I have for general info.
So I think the next matter is election of officers. So I would ask for nominations for chair.
I'd like to nominate Ash to be chair.
I second that.
There's a motion and a second.
Should we see if he agrees? Would you?
All right, then I don't know if this requires a roll call vote.
That was
but,
just a majority, so.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, and I'll turn it over to the chair.
And you're on.
So, let's do this then.
I've been thinking about it for a minute.
Alright, then I guess we need a vice chair, right, as well? So any nominations for a vice chair?
I nominate Brian.
Brian?
Are you up to the task? Cause I was thinking you for vice, if you were up to the task.
Sure, I can do it. I'm
Oh, second.
well, the three of us are chairs of other boards.
That was
Is that too, yeah, well, I know you already are, but that's why I'm just asking, cause the only reason I don't wanna put myself out there is time constraints and stuff, and, yeah.
I should be able to do it.
Is there a problem with being a chair or vice chair of multiple commissions here?
No, okay.
So we have a motion and a second.
I'll second. Or first, or whatever
Or
you
third.
need. Or third or fourth, or whatever.
All in favor of Brian as the vice chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Can I just ask who was the first?
I was.
so yeah, welcome vice chair.
Thank you.
Alright. Next order of business then would be to set our meeting schedule. So do we have a preferred cadence?
Yeah, can we ask, Hillary, you've done this a few times. Are you okay if we address you as Hillary?
Yes, totally, please.
You've done this multiple times. We only have 6 months to get this done.
Right.
What do you recommend?
I think most typically I've seen it weekly at first until you get comfortable with what kind of progress you're making. And then it might get stretched out, or you might miss weeks, given the holidays coming up, things like that. So I think the most common is probably to identify a date each week, set a time, and then that's kind of your regular meeting time.
And we sort of have
Some constraints.
some constraints with that because we have other boards and commissions that meet, and we have the BOT that meets. So we have two options, Mondays or Thursdays.
Monday evenings or Thursday evenings?
I said Monday.
I say Thursday.
I'm thinking Thursday.
So Monday, so the next day, the following day is the Board of Trustees meeting, so you can have staff here late at night on Monday and
I'm the
Tuesday.
Well, it will be me and whatever staff you might want to have in to discuss that particular portion of the charter.
And she doesn't typically stay.
And
for
I only
Tuesdays.
stay for board meetings if I have an item on the agenda, otherwise I watch from home.
Monday is also the OSTAP meeting every 4 weeks.
It is, and, no, it's HPAB.
HPAB is every 4 weeks. Is that the
There's
fourth,
a-
the
one-
fourth
Or the
Monday?
fourth,
Every.
HPAB is the fourth Monday.
Either,
second Monday, yeah.
yeah, every
But
Thursdays,
OSTAB is a
there's
Monday
other
too.
meetings on Thursdays as well.
Okay.
It's just we can accommodate being in this room on Mondays or Thursdays most weeks.
And OSTAB is virtual, so we can use this room.
Yes.
This room,
Yeah.
so.
I'm just thinking of when
Right,
I would have conflicts.
And Hillary,
Your
what's your
Wednesday and your-
availability like
Your
if we wanted
Wednesday.
you?
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Does
I mean,
anybody have a conflict on Thursday?
Or a preference.
I have
Well-
a preference for Thursday, just
I
for
have a preference
childcare
for
purposes.
I was just gonna make sure our town staff that were supporting us as well were
Yeah.
available Thursday.
So I typically wouldn't attend regularly unless you needed me to. The plan is that my paralegal back at the firm is gonna kind of go through your meetings each, probably Friday morning, and compile the directions for drafting. But then I can attend, and if I were to attend, this is a fine time.
So then I'll propose the Thursday evenings.
I'll second.
What time?
That's also a good question. What time are we allowed?
Well, we try to keep all of our meeting times standard at 6:30, but we can,
6:30.
what?
I like 6:30. I don't even get home till like 5:30, so.
Candace, did you?
I'm good with 6:30. What, I'm sorry?
You wanted Thursday?
Yeah,
You wanted
6:30 on
Monday?
Thursdays are awesome, cause dinner's
You want
done
Monday?
and
Oh.
kids are on their way to like,
The husbands can get them in bed.
or my mom, cause he's
Oh.
always out of state, but.
Oh, is he? Oh, my goodness.
So Thursdays at 6:30 then
Okay.
would be the proposal?
Okay.
Okay,
Starting a week from Thursday?
Starting week from today.
starting next week, yeah.
Next week.
Starting
Okay.
today.
I'm sorry, I was thinking,
There you go.
for some reason I was thinking it was Monday.
Meet on the way week.
Don't bring us back to Monday, please don't do that.
No.
And
No, I prefer
do we
Thursday.
typically schedule like a duration, or is that just gonna be based on how much business
So
we have?
typically, boards and commissions are 2 hours. You can go longer if you want to, if you need to. That's typically kind of how boards and commissions run, so I would assume that this one would fall under that as well.
Okay,
With the Board of Trustees, we try to do a timed agenda, so it's, everybody knows roughly how much time you have available for each issue, but it's flexible.
Yeah, I was on
We
there for
also-
3 hours the other night watching the thing on.
Study session?
Affordable housing.
Study session on
Affordable
yeah.
housing, yeah.
They tend to go long.
We also included in the email sort of a draft of like the topics you can go through in each meeting. So that's a nice guide, because it will kind of let you know about like, you know, oh, are we running behind? How much material do we have per meeting time? So we just kind of made that for you, so you can obviously edit it, but it's just a rough guide so you can manage yourselves on like.
And that only calls for actually 11 meetings, obviously, that wouldn't be one every week, so yeah, it might.
I assume some of the topics, like,
Yeah.
they might take more than one meeting.
Yeah, and we kind of tried to predictively do that, but if you're finding it took longer, then you might just kind of look at this and say like, okay, it just kind of gives you a rough idea, like having a facilitator, like, oh, we need to move a little faster, or we're good to spend a lot of time here. And we also included in red, proposed town staff who you might wanna talk to on that topic. It's totally optional, but just to give you an idea of like who does that work in town.
Okay.
And there may be other topics you want to add as well, because I know you had based that off of,
Castle Pines.
Castle Pines, yes.
Charter, right there,
And
maybe
so-
things. Other than that.
And if we had a request for a specific member of town staff to attend, how far in advance would we need? Like, how far in advance do you need if we wanted your presence at one?
I will be free for these regular meetings, so just the meeting before would be good.
Yeah, I figure if the.
And just come through you
Yeah,
guys to
yeah,
request.
just reach out to me and I will coordinate it.
For the most part, I bet we'll have the request for one, like a staff member at the next meeting at the current meeting,
Right.
so.
For these Thursdays, do we wanna, actually figure out which ones we're not gonna do around, say, the week of Christmas?
That's probably a good idea. So let's see, what do we have?
There is a calendar up
Yeah.
there that has December,
I got this one up here.
so So today's the 1st.
So Christmas is Sunday.
So 22nd is
What's
the Thursday.
It is, and I think that's when the kids are out of school.
When do they
I think
start?
that's,
22nd, I'm also out of town, but, I mean, if those things happen, I assume it's okay that we miss a meeting.
Yeah, a lot of people's vacations will line up with, you know, school vacation time, right?
yeah.
So would it be like the 22nd and the 29th would be days off, right? That's
Yeah.
days off for some class.
Yeah, it would be.
So we wanna skip those for now, like,
I think
we
we
know
should.
when we're gonna,
I think,
yeah.
yeah. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
if we run into spring break, things like that.
Okay.
Oh, you guys might be done by then. No.
We're going to
And so-
Daytona.
Ooh.
And so we'll reconvene on the 5th then, so we'll do the 8th and the 15th, and then reconvene on January 5th.
Do we, so, and there's still no ability to do hybrid in this room, correct?
It would just have to be, I guess, you'd watch the live stream, right? If you weren't able to attend in
You
person.
could, you could live stream and then text somebody.
Does that count as a meeting?
I don't know.
No, but you'd be under, but you'd
Yeah.
be in the meeting, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't
Would
wanna
you
be
have to
voting
like
by
say their
text.
texts out loud though and share them with
Yeah.
everybody for, you know?
But if people know you're texting, then that's quorable, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you're welcome to watch, but you wouldn't be able to participate.
We could have like the YouTube live comments up on the screen,
Right,
right?
there you go.
Well, that would definitely be a way to get more of the public involved.
Is that a plan to ever make this a hybrid style, put in the infrastructure for that, with a microphone and a thing?
So give your little spiel you gave today.
What's
About we're not really doing any renovations to town hall at this point.
Yeah, so we're about to expand town hall. And so every time we renovate town hall, it's very expensive for the taxpayers. And so we're really trying not to renovate town hall until the expansion, and then we'll be kind of in a better facility for all these meetings, which is a priority of ours. And then we also factor in staff time commitment, so all the boards and commissions, you all on the Board of Trustees, try to balance how much we have staff working at night to support all these folks. So it just really helps us if you can come in person.
I'm good with it.
Can I hijack the meeting?
Yes.
We have Denise, our IT director, and she had to step out to set up you guys' emails because that hadn't gotten done. She thought it'd been done and we discovered it hadn't, so.
Okay.
So I had to reset some passwords for emails because they expire after 48 hours. So the individuals who had not had an email set up for them because you're already on another board or you're not on another board, I've set that up. I've sent the email information to Debbie and she's gonna send that to your personal email address.
Okay.
You will then have the link to log in and you'll set up your own email password. Once you are on the email system, I'm also going to be sending you a link. It'll come from me, Denise Jakin, it'll have my signature, and it'll be your know before training. It is a security training that we have everyone that has an email address take. Is there any questions about that? Also, if you ever need any information from the help desk, which is my department's ticketing system, we are very easy to contact. It's just helpdesk@erieco.gov. And anytime you need help with an email password reset or you're concerned about something that you saw in your email, just go ahead and send us an email from that.
Denise, I think I need my password reset. Would you like an email?
I will go reset your password and then I will also send that to Debbie so she can send it to your personal email address.
So then from now on, other than the email you just talked about, everything's gonna come to our town emails.
Yes.
Yes.
Once you're set up on email,
Yes.
that's the only communication you should use for this.
That's a very important point, yeah.
Yes.
So Town of Erie email for Town of Erie business.
Yes.
Keep your personal life out of it.
Otherwise, we have to Cora your emails.
I will check the question that you had for me about the email on your iPad. I'm almost 100% confident and it was just a mistype, but I will check and I will send you an email with that information.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you
thanks,
very much.
Denise.
Thanks, Denise. Thank you.
Of course. Well, that falls under the next item for the additional information.
Oh, well, there you go.
Alright, so one quick question. Are we only going to use, you had already asked Ash about having personal meetings with town.
Yes.
Do we wanna have any group meetings with the town other than having public comment at these meetings? Do we wanna have any dedicated meetings just to input.
I think we'll have a better idea once we see how we start progressing and
So,
I think there will probably, if we start seeing like repetitive questions from the digital form, it might give us an idea that there's a need for, more public engagement and that might warrant like an outside with the public meeting type of thing.
because considering how close the election was, I think the more town meetings we have, the better.
Can I ask, Hillary, would those be considered public hearings, or is that just like an information gathering session they could have with residents?
It's the latter, it doesn't need to be formal, yeah.
Yeah, good. So I
If
was
they
hoping
do it
more
as a
informal.
group, we have to notice it.
It has to be noticed, yeah, at least 24 hours agenda notice, yeah.
Yeah, I think we might need some just because there is a lot of concern about the specific topic around the town, so it would be good to have more public engagement outside of just these meetings, I think. But we can decide like specifics when the need arises, I think.
If we do those public meetings, are they going to be in here? Can we use the boardroom or some other larger room if more people wanna show up?
We can schedule it in different venues if it, either, depending on the availability of the room, the boardroom, I think, or the
Right,
community center.
the community center is going to be more difficult.
Yeah.
It would be easier to do it here, and I'm concerned if you're talking weekends and things like that, is that, depending on timing of when you might wanna hold these.
Maybe it's just one of the Thursdays.
Yeah, it
We
could be
do-
that
we
we
do-
dedicate a
we do.
Thursday.
We do a couple of the drafting of the articles and then have a public hearing, and then draft a few more and have a public hearing.
Yeah.
So at least
I think
throughout
that
the
makes the
process.
most sense instead of like waiting to the end for public comment, cause then they could throw a bunch and they might want
Yeah.
a bunch changed and then we gotta go back.
Yeah, cause if we come
agree
up with
that.
something that's totally off the wall and a lot of people see an issue with it, we'd rather find out early, right?
Early, right, 100%.
It would probably be good to along with establish the dates and then figure out if we do, when those
Yeah.
public hearings are, so that can be put out to the public and.
So just to be clear though, the public's welcome at any of these meetings, and if you wanna build in public comment time
Yes.
on your normal agenda, that could happen too. Are you thinking these would be topic-specific
So
conversations?
one suggestion we had when we were discussing all of this was to possibly have a public comment section at the beginning of the meeting where they only talk about what's on the agenda for that night. So their comments would be geared toward what you're gonna talk about during that meeting that night.
Okay,
And so that way they wouldn't veer into the other topics that you're gonna talk about later.
right.
So that was one thought we had early on.
Can we put a time limit on that?
It would be 3 minutes per
Yeah, I said
person.
that we could do that.
Yeah.
My concern is though, is like, where are we gonna put the public? Because they can't comment online, and if we're gonna be primarily, like, I mean, what if people decide to show up?
We're gonna send the address out.
Can we reserve the boardroom every time?
So the reason we chose not to put you all in the boardroom is then there's more staff.
There's 3 additional staff that would be needed to
Yeah.
run the boardroom.
Is
So-
there like another room that's?
No.
I'm
So,
glad that we're expanding.
Your original plan sounds pretty good, is let's do a few things and then hold a meeting in the boardroom where public comment has.
Right. Where it's more open, we invite more people just so we
Yeah.
can make sure. And we might have to shuffle the time, because I know a lot of people, like, if we have it every time at the same time, there's people who would be precluded from coming due to other commitments, so we should
That's a legit
shuffle the
point.
time a little bit.
But if we did it there, they would have access on the internet, cause
But-
right?
Is that
So
two-way?
they could,
Is
yeah,
that
you
too?
can give public comment via Venmo or not
If
Venmo.
we are in the boardroom, we can do.
Maybe your public
We can
comment.
do Zoom, and you can do online comments
If we're over there.
if we're over there.
Would it be possible to do a fully virtual meeting, or do we wanna keep it all in person every time? I know in
You
my
could do a
work,
virtual
That's
meeting.
completely up to you all.
I think if we have a need, because we're gonna have too many people out, but who would be available, we could play that by ear if we give you guys enough warning, right?
Okay.
Can we put draft copies of this up for the public as we move along here, or do you wanna hold off on that?
You sure can. I would propose that maybe each agenda include the current draft. So it would give me, say I get direction on Friday from one of your prior meetings, and then I'll have a few days to draft. and then it could get to town staff in time for the agenda and packet for the next meeting. So it could be released that way.
That's good.
I do wanna avoid having like a Google Doc where people can just like
Oh.
chime in and throw their suggestions, just because it's unclear whether that's a meeting, it's gonna be too hard to manage. So I think a PDF, you know, a hard copy of the running draft is totally fine, and if people wanna submit comments based on that.
And if like, one of the things that was a recurring concern was just making sure people were aware of what was going on. So if we all go on our personal like charter commission Facebook profiles and share the link to the agenda, that's completely okay, right? Just say, here's what we're talking about, here it includes the current draft. If you have any questions or concerns, please submit via this comment form online. And that would be okay, acceptable use of social media?
Yeah, so official charter commission Facebook,
Well, unaffiliated, well,
but that's a question, because I think the town social media policy is pretty clear about if you have an official sort of Town of Erie account, you're not doing personal stuff with that account, because it gets pretty messy, so let's just.
It's the other way around, actually. It's a lot of us created pages for the campaign.
yeah,
And so we just wanna put a link on that page to point them to the official page from now on.
Sure, and I don't wanna prevent that, I just wanna make sure we're not doing something different
Not
with
doing the
this
other way
body than we are with other town
I
boards.
think as long as it's separate from your personal pages, it's clearly your commissioner.
Yeah.
right.
Then yes, as long as you share just things that are shared, you know, pointing them back to the official pages, that's.
That makes sense.
So personally, as myself, I can't post a link to the agenda.
No, you can.
Okay.
You can, but if you start, I mean, it gets complicated if you, on your personal page, start advocating for, you know, I don't know, something you feel very strongly about to be in the charter content, then are you converting your private page to sort of a more public
Okay.
forum that then has different rules that apply to it? So it's really for protection of your personal space that we encourage you to have an official one that is for official business that's subject to the, you know, the town's record retention policy, open records requests, that kind of thing. And then you keep your private stuff private. But if you wanna post links, you know, we can't stop you.
Plus, as elected officials, there's requirements on, we're not allowed to like block constituents and things like that.
Correct, so if you do mix them and then you have, you know, a problematic person who's showing up on your personal account, you know, it gets messy, so. You wanna be able to sort of retain your personal life and your ability to block people on your personal account, and not mix the two.
And I'll just add, this probably goes without saying, but when you post something on your page, you're acting as a spokesperson for the whole town and all of our staff and everything. So just really check the information, and you can always say like, hey, can you look over this with us? The Board of Trustees does that a lot, because people will see you as an official spokesperson of the town. Technically, the town administrator and mayor are the official spokesperson, so you can say like, here's a link, but if you're like, oh, town staff, blah, 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 or like get into that stuff, then you sort of have taken on that role, and that's against the social media
Who
policy.
do we send information to if we want it vetted for social media posting?
Amy, and then she'll get it to the right people.
Okay. And so we'll just send it to you and you'll confirm that we're okay to post.
Yep.
Okay.
And so, just so you know, the agendas will be posted 24 hours. Because you're gonna do weekly at first, it's probably gonna be 24 hours before the meeting happens. It's not gonna be like we do for the Board of Trustees right now, which we post them on Fridays for the following Tuesday. We're probably not gonna have that leeway, because we're gonna be attaching the draft of the charter to that. So it's gonna be posted 24 hours before your next meeting, so. And it will be on the website, so they can get to the agendas that way.
And to propose new agenda topics, we would go through, which one of you?
You would go through.
Through Ash.
So is Ash writing the agenda, or is the town staff writing the agenda?
You guys come up with the topics.
Yep.
And Debbie and I will make sure it gets into the proper format.
Okay.
To be posted.
And you typically would decide the meeting prior what the next agenda is, right?
One thing that.
Yeah, and, go ahead.
Mine's a little off topic.
Okay, and so for agendas, it doesn't need to be like this full lengthy thing of what's happening, it could just be the topic you're gonna discuss, correct? And then, so that it's not this huge agenda that people have to thumb through pages or look through pages online. Just a basic topic of what you're gonna talk about at the next meeting, whether it's,
Very good.
right, exactly like this, so that it's just brief and to the point. Because I probably will have to enter all of that manually as opposed to a BOT agenda, which I don't have to enter.
Okay.
Who should we contact if we're not gonna make it to a meeting?
Your chair.
Probably Ash and myself,
Should we throw Brian on there?
yes, yeah,
But
That makes
That's
it easier.
three.
Makes three.
That's three.
okay, Ash and myself. Ash can tell Brian.
I'll let you know for sure.
It's three because you're one of them.
Yeah,
I get
cause if the person who's, the person
Yeah.
being absent counts as one.
Yes.
plus
But
chair and
as
vice
long
chair.
as there's not back and forth, but it's better.
It's better to be safe than sorry.
So when I sent that email to you, or and I copied the home rule email address.
That's okay because you send it to everyone,
Okay,
that is
But they
acceptable.
can't reply back to you,
And
reply
I-
all back
right,
to you.
But I reply all back, so they know that what I'm saying to you, I'm saying to all of them.
Okay.
So you can put, if you want, if one of you is emailing me and you want everybody to know what you're saying, that is acceptable. It's just if you guys start talking back and forth in a conversation manner, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, so she could, if she wasn't gonna come to a meeting, she could email both of them.
Yeah.
And you, because it's not a meeting, you're just notifying them, as long as they don't reply all back. It's responses back and forth that then
Okay,
create the
so
meeting.
one-way communication.
One
is
way
fine.
is fine.
I wonder what happened to make that happen.
It's just, that's part of the open meeting laws, right?
Yeah.
That's just, it was written in there, okay.
And typically, if there is a question that I get from one of you, I'm going to assume that everybody might have that same question, and so I will reply all in my response. Just so you all know so I'm not like talking to, behind the scenes to somebody, I will reply all.
So just to confirm, absences reported to Brian, myself, and Amy.
No,
No, that's three people.
Amy.
No, it's actually,
No, it's okay.
Oh, yeah, it's one way.
it's,
Two of us just can't reply all.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Should we have some suggested reading or homework as we're gonna be getting into this thing?
Yes.
I think Malcolm sent out, or
Yeah, I thought it was very helpful. I
Yeah.
read the Eagle Charter and the Custom one too, so
Yeah.
very helpful to have that background.
I
There's a lot of-
actually would like to read charters that have grown with the population. I mean, because I looked up the population of those towns and they were talking 7,000, 10,000 people. I'd like to see
Yeah.
a charter that was made and then grew, the population grew, to see how that affected that, so.
Although it was interesting to see one of them, the last one, Hudson, I think, was 1,000 or 1,700 people.
Yeah.
Ward's 143.
So if you do it right, you shouldn't have to change it, and that's my bias.
Right,
So.
yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of similarities between all three, so it was good to see that at
Half
least.
the font was really short.
Yeah.
At 20 pages, 22
Yeah.
pages, something like that.
Yeah.
That's the shortest one I've read.
Yeah.
So, but.
It was-
And one of the things,
Simple is better.
I don't
Yes.
disagree.
and that gets into a topic that I know I talked to you briefly about, about being able to edit the charter. It seems there's two ways, either forming a new charter commission or putting something in the charter saying you can do it by vote.
No, well, kind of. If you want to propose amendments, and it's not you, it'd be the Board of Trustees, it has to go to a vote.
Mhm.
So those proposed amendments could be referred to voters by the Board of Trustees or initiated by voters using the initiative and referendum process. Or if you're looking at a whole like a total overhaul,
No.
that's when you would convene a second charter
Okay.
commission.
So we don't have to state that in the charter, that's just automatic.
That's controlled by state law, correct?
Okay, wonderful.
That helps.
one thing that's come up, you mentioned you writing the draft, is that someone in your firm will be actually typing it up and then sending it out, and then we
Yours
just
truly.
review that? I guess we could put comments on as needed, or how?
Yeah, so what I would envision is the draft, so the draft goes out in the agenda packet, it's discussed it goes out on a Wednesday for the Thursday meeting, it's discussed. changes are made, proposals are made, you guys talk about the specifics that you like or don't like. And then the next week's version would include those comments plus new content.
Okay.
So you'd be kind of building as you go, you'd be reflecting on what you've done and whether you like it and whether it reflects what you wanted it to. If you have changes to that, we can do that. And you'd also be adding new content.
So do you have any additional reading for us? before
I
we
think
prep for next week?
the charters that are available, like online for the state in general, you know, any of them, you're gonna see a lot of similarities, especially ones that are of similar vintage, so they kind of tend to follow each other. And you're gonna find a few screwy provisions that are just, you're like, wow, that's really what they had on their mind at the time. And it becomes clear that that was really the issue for that community at that time. And if you have questions about any of them, if you find one that's curious or you're intrigued, you know, bring it to the commission and we can talk about it. I think probably the initial biggest decision, and this might be getting ahead of us a little bit, but is your form of government. So that's gonna really dictate a lot of the charter provisions. Most of the charters out there are for a council manager form of government. So if you're gonna go with that, a lot of the examples are gonna be applicable. If you're gonna stray from that, then you're gonna have to be sort of more selective at what you look at.
So what were the other options? That was one of the things I was wondering,
Yeah,
is there's like a strong mayor form and then there's,
Council mayor manager, which is essentially what Erie has now. Council manager, in my opinion, it involves choosing the mayor from among the council. Some cities do that. Boulder used to do that. I think they've changed recently based on their election, but the council as a whole chooses the mayor every 2 years.
Lafayette does that.
As opposed, okay,
Winter Park,
Lafayette.
and Winter
Lafayette's
Park does
okay.
that, yeah.
So council mayor manager has the mayor elected at large.
And that wasn't that wasn't in the ones that you sent out.
there was one that was,
Council mayor, I didn't
well,
remember seeing
it said council
I thought they were all
manager.
Council manager.
But then one of them had a mayor that was elected at large and it had districts as well, and I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, and that's not much, I mean, the distinction between a mayor being elected by the people and by the council isn't gonna change much other than simply that election process. So it's pretty comparable to a
So
mayor.
in that one, it was basically that the mayor was an at-large counselor.
Same powers as all the other
Yeah.
Right, they
members.
have no,
Oh,
No
so
veto
then,
power.
No
yeah,
greater
veto would
authority.
be the big one, right?
Mhm.
Council, mayor, manager would, like the mayor would have a veto power.
That's a strong variation of the commission that decides to those.
And you use the terminology, strong mayor, is that like full-time professional?
Yeah, that's what I.
Tends to be, the mayor almost takes on the paid professional position.
So it's like an elected manager essentially.
Correct. They're hard to come by.
And it's like a Denver, I'll just offer, I worked for
Yeah.
Denver for 8 years, I worked for the mayor of Denver, that's a strong mayor. He has no other job, he's paid a full salary. He would have like a chief of staff, but he selects all the directors, manages all of them. So it's sort of like the primary person who runs day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
Tends to be more common in big cities
You
than
see it
in
in
Yeah,
smaller
I
municipalities.
think that makes sense for Denver, I don't know if it makes sense for us.
I drafted the Colorado Springs charter that's in place now that shifted Colorado Springs to strong mayor. And it was actually by an initiated citizen movement, so citizens were behind the strong mayor idea. They thought that that's what Colorado Springs needed to kind of move to the next level. And then they put that charter on the ballot and it was approved, and now you have John Suthers down there as strong mayor.
And I have worked in both strong mayor and council manager forms. And so I'm happy to answer any questions you have on either of those.
What is the practical difference that you've noticed then working under both as far as, you know, how the government functions, whether you've got an elected manager or an appointed manager by the council?
Yeah. Probably in the strong mayor form, the mayor is much more involved in political issues, and at least in my own experience, the mayors I worked under in that system delegated to me as the chief administrative officer the day-to-day operations. So they're more political, they're full paid time, and this was in Bellingham, Washington. The mayor actually had a veto power over legislation adopted by the council. So it's stronger and concentrating the executive power in the elected mayor, as opposed to having more administrative executive power in the manager, but it's all subject to the council's policies. So, and you know, the practical difference is it depends a lot on who gets elected and their qualifications versus somebody who's hired by the council to manage the affairs based on their experience and their ability to perform. And a big difference is the appointed manager can be dismissed. You don't have to wait 4 years to get rid of.
Or do a recall, yeah.
Or to do a recall.
Mhm.
So I would suggest that provides a little more accountability.
Does anyone have any other questions regarding the forms?
Are we talking about that right now? Like, are we gonna talk about like what the, or are we just talking about, this is gonna be one of the more tricky things for us to figure out, is what I was hearing.
Yeah.
Form of government, and so questions now, but we're debating it? Are we debating putting something out there at this point, or?
I think we're just proposing what we talk about first and form of government.
And for personally, I think information gathering, because I believe, as you know, pursuing your suggestion, this is probably gonna be our first decision next week.
Yeah.
And so our homework for this will be figure out what sort of government we foresee and debate it at our meeting next week, and perfect time to ask questions since we have very experienced people.
And a related question is city versus town. Now, it seems what I've researched, the main difference is almost philosophical or what it looks like. Do you want to consider a town or be considered a city? I don't wanna get into a big debate now about that, but I think that's something that also goes along the same line of discussion. That's what I think we'll definitely need some public input.
I mean, as far as what I saw from the example ones, it was mostly a cosmetic thing, right? Cause there was some
Yeah.
that we're a town and.
I can give you some background on that. So in Colorado, as a statutory community like Erie is, statutory towns are of a certain size, statutory cities are of a bigger size. So typically when a town becomes home rule, obviously those statutory provisions about town versus city no longer apply, but they're already established as a town. And they don't want to change because there's name recognition and there's a certain identity that goes with being the town of Erie. So typically, if a statutory town becomes home rule, they retain the status as a town, but they choose to use town council instead of town board of trustees. That's kind of the distinction between the statutory body versus the home rule body. But
It'll
it's
also be a-
totally preference.
It'd also be a bit of expense changing all the signs, for example.
Very expensive.
Yeah, we actually talked about that.
We did.
Literally, cosmetic, I think more people were passionate about keeping town and the people who didn't care
Yeah.
cities, so I think just keeping it Town of Erie makes sense.
Like you all see
Saves
on the
money.
name
Saves
tag.
money.
It's very
noticing that, it's on
identified.
Name tag, who knows, might not do.
Well, Sarah, the one thing I would say about that,
Too.
Sarah, the one thing I would say about that
Mhm.
is you're talking about the people who are more vocal. I don't think because some people are more vocal means it's necessarily the majority.
That's
I'm not
the-
saying you're wrong.
But the ones that I've talked to that aren't more vocal are like, we don't care.
Yeah.
But we definitely should ask the public,
Yeah.
that's not anything we should decide, but I mean, that's just the vibe I get.
Yeah,
personally.
I understand. I
Yeah.
just, particularly after this election, I've realized there are some people who are very, very vocal and it's not
Most
necessarily
people are
that they're
not.
the majority, because
Most
often
people
they're
are
not,
not.
so.
I guess, yeah, we're on our additional information side of things, so we've got time, but do we wanna set our agenda then for next week? And
Sure.
based on what we have in the email and the draft kind of outline. Let's see.
I'm not even sure where form of government
Yeah, we have
fits in here.
preamble, hey, preamble. Some of those are cool. And then Article 1, general provisions and elective offices. So under both of those, they were kind of like, they were governing the format of the actual, charter document and then the form of government.
And we may decide that we wanna make that its own article if we want to.
Yeah.
We can.
So, okay, so everyone good with sticking with that for our next meeting is just preamble and based on other formats, the general provisions, and then our elective offices, in other words, the form of government we're gonna pick.
So what are we gonna cover under form of government terms too, or just the form of government?
I think that was listed under the elective offices, the election cycle and, I mean, we can, is there a set to do for transition? Because we can also talk then about how we transition from our current form into the next form of government.
I think
Wasn't
that,
that like at the end?
yeah, I think that's like meeting 8 with miscellaneous provisions.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that later in example charter. So homework is to study those sections of charters that you find online.
Yeah,
or-
and find out if you have any questions, ask town staff and before our next meeting and let's see, for those elective offices, I think, do we wanna request any of the town staff present for those other than Amy?
Well, Malcolm has some good experience working with both. I think we may have more pointed questions
And
next
he's
week.
listed as well.
Yeah, I think we should follow this at least for our first couple
Yeah.
of meetings until we get
So
to the hang of things.
town-
I think we should expect it to be at least a 2-hour meeting if we're covering those 3 things.
Well, is the preambles, they're pretty basic,
short,
aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, from what I've read, they're almost
They set,
identical.
I would almost
they
write
set
that
the soul
last.
of the government, I think, a little bit, cause there was some minor differences between each one and I'd
Yeah,
like,
I think, I agree, I think last
I
is
think we
kind
should write that
of
one last.
more appropriate because it is sort of it's your introduction, but also your parting words for how you want this document to be
It's
viewed.
almost like an executive summary.
could also set the tone of future conversations though. Was kind of my idea.
Maybe it's worth having a conversation.
Yeah, how about we can touch on it a little bit
Yeah.
and then
Not
we're not
just-
gonna finalize it.
Yeah, but also maybe some concepts around the table that are, what do we see here, what do we like about Erie, what do we wanna keep around? To what degree can we make changes, you know, what's the legal boundaries here? Maybe it's just worth an open air conversation, just to feel
Regarding the
everybody out.
preamble or just in general?
No, I'm not talking about the preamble, I'm just talking about a general
Okay.
agenda item of us just
Okay.
talking.
Yeah, so I think then for the agenda next week, we'll wanna do under our general business. We'll wanna handle general comments about, you know,
Our own experiences, our own, I won't say plan, but, you know, focus here as we've signed up to do this, we did it for a reason.
yeah,
Right.
what we foresee as, you know, kind of what we want out of that. I guess that was actually listed for today, wasn't it? Some of that.
One, you mean, or the agenda?
Is this, meeting one intros, okay, no, you're right, it's under meeting 2. So, yeah, well, I guess it's not really under.
I think you, with it only being 7:30, if you guys wanna add more to tonight's agenda,
Yeah.
you are.
We can talk
Yeah,
about, I
yeah.
think, our general thoughts and where we're coming from, where we're approaching all of that from today. And then, so, but let's set our agenda so we don't rush that at the end for next week. So yeah, we'll talk about a little bit of what we have foreseen at the end of this meeting. And then let's touch on Article 1 and 2 for next week. The general provisions and elective offices. So form of government, do all the homework that you can. But we'll go through those 2 sections. And if we could, sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? For posting your agenda, and this might be for Hillary or Malcolm, or I don't know. Is there a specific charter that you guys are gonna start with that we need to upload to your agenda? Or where does that start? I guess I don't understand the starting point in order for us to post
Yeah,
it with the
and
agenda.
I'm with you, I have a similar question.
Okay.
And I was gonna frame it a little differently and say, so for your next meeting, would you want to look at Article 1 and 2 of specific charters and have those in your packets as sort of reference material? For comparison purposes, you're certainly capable of going out there and finding your own too, but is there kind of a common one or two that you wanna pull out now and say, let's start from these? Cause it's much easier to draft by changing something that's already there than to just make it out of whole cloth. So if you're comfortable, for example, with starting with Castle Pines or Eagle, we can certainly make as many changes to those documents as you want. They just serve as kind of a foundation. And we could have the contents of those in the packet and ready for discussion.
then based on your experience, what do you see as a good starting point? Which town or city in Erie or Colorado?
Well, so Eagle's the most recent one, that I've
Also
worked on.
smaller though, right?
Yeah, smaller, slightly different geographically, you know, isolated mountain town, maybe different interests. But it has it has a good skeleton. So you can certainly add provisions, take away, but if you follow that and walk through it, you're gonna hit all the high points and have a charter that gets you basically where you need to go. So I would be comfortable starting from that. As far as my drafting, I would probably start from that as a working document and then make changes as you go.
Okay.
But
Is there like a Colorado Municipal League, like, start here sort of thing?
no, they just provide us of samples.
Okay.
Same thing we've done. They're just like, these are some good ones. Go out and look at them. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like the opportunity to do my own homework.
Yeah. So do we wanna then set for the agenda next week a kind of what we're gonna start from as well? Cause that'll be cramming next week, I think, a little bit. As far as like deciding, looking at different charters and then we discuss together which one we wanna start
I
from.
don't think that we have to specifically choose one and that's the only one, right? So if you go out and you're like, wow, this town just nailed it, send that information over to them, ask them to distribute it, we'll get it in our next packet, we can look at it. This doesn't have to be so cut and dry, and we also don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So
Right.
let's
Okay.
keep it fluid, I think.
Did you mention including a few different charter versions of Article 1 and 2 in next week's
Yeah.
packet?
I mean, and I would, if we were to do that, I would just start from the ones that were sent out as examples, so Castle Pines and Eagle. And then if there's others that you guys wanna see, we could pull those together.
Okay.
Um,
Well, both of, yeah,
for comparison purposes, if you wanted to see like a real outlier like Denver or.
I don't think we're gonna,
No.
we're not gonna approach Denver.
Pass on the debt.
Well, and I know you wouldn't necessarily incorporate those provisions, but you might see differences, it might just be a curiosity.
I mean, it could be worth looking at Longmont and Thornton
Yeah.
around us.
Yeah, your neighbors, if you wanted
Lafayette is
to.
a neighbor and they do things fairly similarly.
Yeah, like I said, I just wanna see how like specific governments that were picked and charters grew with towns instead of going off of, you know.
Yeah,
charters
cause
of
these
smaller.
are mostly fairly recent ones that were sent out, so.
If you remember, I sent out that list a while ago of which towns are home rule versus have
Yes,
their own
you did.
charter
Mhm.
and their population size. So you can look at that. If you don't have the link, let me know and I'll send it to you.
One at
Um,
a time.
So yeah, then let's at least, as far as the skeleton, we'll start with, I propose we'll start with your suggestion of using Eagle. And everyone will go out and do their research over the next week. If we have any others that wanna be included in the discussion and comparison for the package next week, just let Amy know. And we'll go from there to look at Article 1 and 2 next week.
And this may go without saying, but Article 1 and 2 in other charters may not always be these two topics, so.
Okay, then yeah, then,
So just look
typically-
for those specific topics.
Yeah, typically they're gonna follow in this order, but you might find an oddball that's,
okay.
Yeah.
So we'll go with general provisions and elective offices as our first two topics for next week. I propose, anyone second?
I second.
I don't know if you need a second.
I don't know. This is my first time doing this, so.
I don't think you need a second for something like that.
I guess
He's a
that's my,
chair, he
I guess
can call
that's my
for votes if he wants.
responsibility then, is set that, so. Yeah, I expect you guys to hit me upside the head if I'm being stupid
I'll do
with
it.
something. Alright, so that'll set our agenda for next week. So if we wanna continue this week's discussion, we were talking about more where we're coming from and big picture idea of where we see it, where we see how we want to approach this and where we wanna get. And to start with, I just wanna point out the other ballot measure that was on the ballot for this year. And it was maintaining tax level to maintain open space in Erie. And that was
Really
like,
a priority.
that was 80% in favor.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think no matter what, I think everyone can agree that one of the things everyone loves about Erie is open space, and we wanna keep it that way. So I think starting from that point of view, I think will be beneficial to show what kind of people live in Erie, whatever side of the political divide you live on. Everyone likes the nature, the open space of Erie. So let's approach it all from that
And
framing.
And the other thing to remember is every charter I saw, and there was more than 3 sent out, it said that town rule is nonpartisan.
It should be.
Yeah, and it should be.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyone else wanna continue the discussion?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I fully agree, Ash, and with, it's coming off the most recent Board of Trustees, you know, I had recent experience with running into situations where home rule versus statutory was a consideration. I wouldn't say it was the thing that stopped us from doing something, but it was also, it was a regular question that we would ask to the staff. Hey, if we were a home rule town, would we be able to do this a little bit easier? So the changes that would have been necessary for making things a little bit more simple here, so like we discussed we discussed moving the election, so moving the election to November. So that's something we would have to do one at a time. We do this one
Which
thing.
your town clerk is all for, so.
As
It just makes sense.
noted that it also does cost extra to run the election in April here.
Correct.
So things like that, things, what else can I remember? Oh, there was, marijuana came up. We had one of the action items that we asked Malcolm to look into is would there be support for marijuana? I think we put that into the community survey, and whether or not there was, the one of the things that makes it a decent option in town comes with the ability to collect taxes on it, and we cannot add taxes to any type of activity that's outside of a statutory nature. That's my understanding, and that's what I remember coming into. So there wasn't a whole lot of things that we couldn't do as a statutory town that we could as a home rule, but I remember it regularly. So things that I'm gonna switch to, you know, my own personal experience here. Things that I would have liked better as a trustee is the ability to have coordinate elections with the rest of the county and state, because it draws a larger audience, draws more voters. I would have liked to see mayors be able to run or to stay in place for longer than 2 years at a time. I know that right now we run a 2-year mayor cycle and a 4-year trustee cycle, and what that does is it essentially puts a brand new mayor in a learning curve for about a year, just because that's what it takes to get up to speed to run to be a part of the board, and then almost campaign mode if you want to stick around. So I talked to previous mayors and they felt that way. I think that the pay for trustees is incredibly insufficient. Not that I want I'm not gonna propose a strong mayor system, but not that I think these should be full-time positions, but I do know that the $300 a month that we receive as trustees is not really enough to maintain your focus throughout all 4 years. And that doesn't sound good, because like you ran to be a trustee, you signed up for this, and I agree that is true, and that's what we set to do. But then when it comes time to go over a 90-page agenda prior to going in, or to fully understand all the aspects of how to do business in Erie, and going around talking to business owners, the amount of time that you have to put in that is nice to be compensated for, not to the degree of a job, but more than just your water bill.
Well, it's not just about what's nice too, but you have to think about the type of people you would be able to draw in. More
Second
people
point, yeah.
might be interested in running for a trustee position.
You might get a larger
If they felt like they were, you know, their time was kind of compensated.
Yeah, or
You know?
maybe they can't. Maybe they don't have a job that allows them to take the amount of time away from their job, unpaid,
There's that
and maybe
too,
you
yeah.
you could open your candidate pool that way.
But what would you like to see in the charter about that?
Well,
Isn't it up
Yeah,
to-
how would you do that to stand the test of time, right? Cause you can't be like, we're gonna raise everybody's pay to $500 a month. Cause
No,
in
but
20
you do
years,
it-
that would be.
Right, but you could do it like a percentage, you know, like every year you know,
But
you.
why would you put that in the
increase.
charter?
It's in some
That's-
charters, but it's not that, it's that the
It's-
council sets,
Right.
which I kind
Yeah.
of don't necessarily agree that the person paying themselves should determine how much they
Well,
get paid.
the way
one of
I've
the-
seen it raised
So
is.
can we figure out a different way to do it then?
Usually they say it takes effect
I mean,
after
can
the
we?
next election.
Possibly, I mean, it's,
That's
that I
what
don't
we
know that
Right.
detail, but I do remember reading in there that it was,
Yeah, but I don't think we would set anything at that's pretty micro level
yeah,
for what we would set in the
Yeah.
charter.
Yeah.
And so I understand what you want, and I just don't know what we would do in the charter for it, other than maybe give a philosophical statement or something, but you don't want that in the charter either.
it is in some, so there's
Oh, okay.
language in there.
Yeah.
I don't remember, it was one of the
Does it say
examples.
It'll be set by ordinance, which is.
Yeah, set by ordinance.
Council, and that, shall not be increased or decreased to affect anybody who's currently in office, so you
That's
can't increase your own salary or
Right.
decrease it either way.
Oh, okay, I didn't catch that detail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they all take effect, all three of them, or two of them that had that provision, it was like, it all takes effect the
Yes.
next cycle.
Well, there's two separate things there, though. One is taking effect next cycle, the other is if you're on the board and get reelected, does it take effect? But anyway, I don't think we need to get into that
Yeah.
discussion right now.
Older
But that's a way to address it
and that's what they
without
do.
Exactly.
specifics of percentages or anything like
It's-
that.
I think it's for the duration of their term, so if their term ends and they go up for reelection, then, and they get reelected,
That's
then
fair.
they do get the new salary, yes.
Because you don't want people to be paid different amounts for the same role.
some other things that I encountered was land use,
Oh, definitely.
zoning. So what can we do? How could we zone, especially with the comprehensive plan being reevaluated? What could we zone that would attract the right type of developments in the right areas? I always use senior housing as an example. We can say this is a multifamily house or this is a high density housing area, but that doesn't say that, you know, we really want to attract senior housing in this area. So nothing is preventing senior housing from coming on and being built into an area where the density allows it. But there might be ways for the comprehensive plan to be written in ways that attracts the right things that meet what Erie likes. And driving all the way back to what you started this whole thing with, Erie likes the small town feel, the open space, the trails, the nature. You know, this town is not gonna be a huge metropolis. Now, we may be able to take advantage of some of the stuff at I-25 at some point in time. We may be able to offer the people who live in town a town center that's fun to visit, for not just visit, but go to as the regular residential place to visit and shop. But outside of those things, I don't see the town of Erie being a whole lot different than, you know, what we have come to know and love, and the reason we all moved here. Now, there is reason to continue the commercial growth, you know, because a lot of the revenue for so long was generated by housing, and it still is. There's still lots of homes in the hopper that are coming up, but that's not going to be sustainable. And encouraging commercial development is huge. Now, encouraging commercial development on the borders that grabs money that's not even in town is a good way to do it, and not
Impact too much.
not impact the residents who live here for the reason they live here. So
Go on.
my last one would also be taxation. I realized that having the state, having the state collect taxes for us and then getting into debates about how much was returned to the town versus how much should have been, based on the local knowledge of what the businesses are doing and, you know, what type of commercial impact or economic development impact is being had by people leaving. So there was ways for us to realize a little bit better revenue collecting our own taxes. I'm in favor of that. Now, the thing I have a degree of favor for a variety of things. That one I'm partial to, but I wouldn't say I'm strongly in favor of. So there's a lot of stuff up for debate, and I've monopolized too much time.
Yeah, well, I wanted to comment also on the zoning, because as a lot of you know, I'm pro affordable housing. And it would be really nice to have people who work in Erie, particularly as we get more people working in the town, to afford to be able to live in the town. But it's just my bias.
It makes sense, for, you know, sustainability long-term. I mean, Boulder has that problem, right, where the only way that the people who work there can afford to live there is for affordable housing, and we're kind of there too. It would be nice that they didn't have to commute in, right? And it would also be nice, I think, as far as like zoning and things like that, I know quite a few small business owners who own businesses in other cities.
Yeah.
And they commute from here to the other city. It'd be nice to have zoning and spaces for them and provisions to make it easier for small business owners to open up shop here.
But
So,
I'm wondering if you guys can check us as we talk through this, be like, that
Yeah.
can't go into a charter, or
Well,
Please
it's-
interrupt us.
It's whether it should go to a charter or not, or whether you should use the charter as giving,
guidance to the
Yes.
board.
allow this
To the
stuff to
things,
happen.
yeah.
Don't
Exactly.
get so specific.
I
Right.
agree. This should be
And
way more
I
general.
mean, the charter in my eyes should be probably 50 pages or less, something like that. It
Right.
shouldn't be bogged down with all of this.
So I have two parts to that. One is I totally agree. So it's to enable other zoning classifications, to make them easier.
Mhm.
And the other is, again, just because one of us, be it me or anybody else, is for something, public comment is critical. Because we don't want to put something in that's going to get this voted down.
And what we're doing now, or what is wanted now, may not be wanted in 50 years,
Exactly.
or 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're 148 years old.
So the most
Yeah.
important part of this is literally setting up the government, the form of government we want.
So they can
and-
do these things.
So,
They
yeah,
have to
so
do
it's
it
still
in English.
viable decades from now.
Exactly.
The framework.
Long gone.
Yeah.
That's how I
Right.
it's
It
gonna
should-
run,
if-
is like we wanna set the framework
Yeah,
for a sustainable town
Yeah.
government.
I think that we elect people to get into those types of things,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
That's
No
really their,
comprehensive plans and things
Yeah.
like
But I
that.
think like per Adam's point, we wanna, those are the things that, those are the things we want our government to be enabled and empowered to do, we have to make sure that
we just-
the language for that is in the charter. That
And
allows them
you
to.
are already by virtue of the fact of becoming home rule, so
Okay.
if your charter's entirely silent on zoning, which likely it will be, unless you have really specific requests, but charters generally don't address zoning, but what being home rule does is it gets you out from under Title 31's limitations on how you control land use.
Right.
And it allows your future governing bodies to, by ordinance, do all sorts of things that the charter doesn't have to contemplate. And you, as an elected charter commission, don't need to understand or anticipate. It's just, it's an enabling document.
So just by virtue of passing home rule, a charter, it exempts us from all of the statutory, assuming we don't have conflicting, until we have conflicting
Yes,
ordinances, right?
more or less.
And those land use issues are really taken up in your comprehensive plan that we are in the process of updating and we'll be doing significant community engagement on to make sure that it reflects the community's wishes. And then how that comprehensive plan is implemented through the municipal code. So that's the comprehensive plan is like the guiding vision document, and then that gets translated into the legal document of the code that spells out exactly what you can and can't do in terms of land use.
so it'd be good to know as that is being written that we are not conflicting with that. If we're not making something that's going to cause a problem for the comprehensive plan.
We'll let you know.
So we can't put in Adam as king, sorry.
Hey, I didn't.
Well, my kids were saying, can we require everyone to have at least one cat per house, and I said, probably not.
Well, you can, but it may not pass.
That's hilarious.
I like their line of thought. I support.
Pander to the cat.
And we know who really runs household.
The cat.
Did anyone else have any general comments they wanted to make as we approach this?
I'm in the general vibe too of extending the mayor term. I think that makes more sense as we're growing with more people. Having somebody who has more time to get things done and has like this much time and, then has to campaign again. And also in favor of moving elections to November, it makes sense. And it's good to know that it would take a burden off the town and save money. Wonderful. So those
I
were the
guess-
two big ones I was worried about.
One of the questions I had about moving to November, how would that affect the next couple of cycles? Like if we do we have to have an off cycle to elect the new form of government, or can we roll it in, like, cause we'd be doing this in November of next year, right? The charter will be voted November of next year.
You decide that, right? Cause you can call for a special election or it can be done
Right,
during November.
if you're done we'd have to look at the timing, and I've looked at it before, but I'd have to refresh, but if your charter is approved by the board to go to the voters, let's say that occurs at a June Board of Trustees meeting, then the election on the charter has to occur within a certain number of days, which may get you to a general or a November election, but it may not. We'd have to confirm.
There is no election in November of 23, is
Yeah,
there?
there is.
Is there in November of 23?
There's one every November.
There
Oh.
is.
It's not a general election, but it's called the state odd year election.
Oh,
And
okay.
both counties, Debbie and I looked, both counties always hold a coordinated election
In November of
Oh,
odd
So we
years.
could get on that.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
but
it wouldn't
what-
have to-
What happens usually is if the conversion takes place and you have a board whose terms are going to be extended, or usually they're extended, that's just done by ordinance. So the board clarifies by ordinance who's gonna serve until November if their term normally would lapse. But you'll be past that because anyone who would have expired in April will already be off.
So I saw a provision in Eagles that talked about how to transition, like the current elected trustees would be continued until the next election, because they went from April to November too.
And we would have, half of the trustees would because normally we would have an election in April of 2024. So if it did pass in 2023, the charter, and passed with going to coordinated elections, we would have to extend the terms of everybody
To November.
to November, or at least.
But then and that would maintain the stagger because you'd
Right.
only have half that were
Right.
back. So that would work.
One of the things that I find important, I think giving the town power for the zoning is
Yeah,
good.
it is.
But another thing is elections, making sure that the people's voice is heard in the way they want it to be heard.
And not people who are not the people.
Yeah. So a big part of it is potentially, I don't know if we could do this in the home rule charter, but outside money, managing that of sorts. So I don't know exactly what that would look like, but
Is there a way
in
to
my opinion,
prevent candidate committees? Or no, yes, candidate committees.
So you can have your own fair campaign practices requirements within limits. You could probably be more restrictive than state law, but at some point you run into constitutional provisions related to money being equivalent with speech and not being able to limit people's abilities to speak. So it's a tricky issue, but yeah, you do have the ability to impose your own local limits on spending.
So if you wanted to look at like a home rule that has campaign finance stuff written into it, into their charter, Boulder does that. So they have written their own campaign finance law, rules, whatever. And it's fairly large, I believe.
And even if the charter doesn't have details related to it, a future council, this current board, could adopt fair campaign ordinances that could diverge from state law, as long as they were non-constitutional.
And you'd be able to tell us where that gap is.
On a good day.
We'll give you warning,
I
don't worry.
try.
one thing I'd like to see added is a clear path of replacement if a trustee or mayor leaves early or is
Oh,
removed.
yeah, because we ran into that, didn't we?
I was involved in it in 2013, and basically, they had a bunch of people meet with the board and found out there was backroom deals. They just, wasted all of our time. There should just be a clear path. These are the steps.
And not just that, there was quite a few things that would happen that there were not processes in place. And so, establishing the desire for processes for any type of significant changes would be, established processes would be something we should do. And now, maybe that's something Malcolm's already putting into place with his administration, but we didn't have it when I was on the board. We replaced a trustee and we made it up. Like,
Exactly.
it wasn't something we had.
There should be something.
There should be something detailed, just so that
Like,
everyone
yeah,
knows this is the
even
path
more
of replacement.
recently, we had one resign, right?
Exactly.
And replacement was, do we convene the board who appoints, or do they just, like, do we do the whole process of interviews and everything, or just pick the next person?
It'd be nice if that,
Yeah.
any of that was
Because it was so
spelled out.
close to the election too. I think that's why I was cool with the way they did it, is it was so close to the election. We just spent the money on election, like.
I can't remember which ones I've read, but there's charters I've read that detail like 180 days after the election had occurred, if someone is left or removed, then you can do that process.
Right.
So
But
just
within the first,
detailing,
yeah.
Right.
One of the questions I had was regarding like getting on the ballot itself. I didn't see any provisions for that in any of the 3 that were sent out, but like right now, what is it, 25 signatures?
10 signatures.
It depends on what position.
Sorry.
Wait a minute, we had to get more signatures?
We needed more for this than you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like by a lot.
Cause I've seen like they had like 10% of electors for like
They definitely have to work a hell
referendums
of a
and stuff
lot
like
harder.
that. But like for mayor, I didn't see anything like that, or mayor and council, I didn't see anything like that in the 3 that were handed out.
Yeah,
So-
and if the charter is silent, then the municipal election code fills in.
So 25 or 10 is what
10.
is required.
So Boulder had it was a percentage of the registered voters is what it was in Boulder. So there was a percentage into the charter of how many signatures you needed based on the active voter list.
So they have to, like right now, you could just lazily be like, hey, buddies, like you live in town, sign this. And you don't have to have any active passion to wanna be in the role.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
So I think, personally, I think we should increase that bar a little bit.
Yeah,
Yes. I mean,
100%.
Up to a certain point. I mean,
Right.
you could say something just like 0.5% or something, or 1%
Right,
up
so-
to 100 or
Right.
up to 75.
Like a minimum
Is there-
of 100, and if active voter population is more than 0.5% or whatever,
I
right?
think I would cap it. I think getting 100 is a lot. It's a lot of signatures.
For a town of 30,000 though, and
Yeah.
growing.
What's Boulder's?
Yeah, what's a reasonable example?
Boulder is over 100,000 people. And I believe they needed, it was a lot. It was a lot.
Like, is it percentage based or is it
It
number
was
based?
percentage based, and I don't remember the percentage based, but there were a lot of petition packets that we had to count.
I was gonna say, you have to remember that their staff has to go through and
Yeah.
verify every single one of those signatures.
That doesn't fall to the counties.
In addition,
No, we still have to do that.
You know, you wanna keep
Yeah,
the other stuff in mind, cause
The
it's not
practical
just
end
one
of it.
person going out and getting signatures, there's so much going on behind.
Another thing to consider is that typically you can only sign one candidate nomination packet. So if the signature requirement is high and then you're hit up by multiple people because they're trying to get their signatures, you can't, you could conceivably reach a point where you don't have any more people who are willing to sign.
I thought you could sign as many as there were spots open to like run, so if there was
Yeah,
like
if it's an equivalent position, yeah.
Yeah.
so if we do like a council and we have a specific position for mayor, like the mayor would be considered separate from the
Correct.
council, okay? But either way, you could still, okay, yeah.
10 is not much. I was
Yeah.
totally shocked when I.
Yeah, I think that's a little, that's undercutting it. I think, yeah, like even 1% of registered voters would be way too much. So I think we need to find like, that's one of the things we should consider as we go along, is find that happy middle of something reasonable for people as well as for the town staff. And make sure that it's actually is more of a bar than just hitting up your drinking buddies on a Thursday night to
Right,
get your signatures.
right.
I mean, we could nominate a person to run for council or trustee or whatever, so that's a little low, in my opinion. And
10% in Boulder, it's 10% of the average number of registered electors who voted in the previous 2 elections.
There you go.
yeah, that's insane.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
Hey.
And that can deter some good people too,
Yeah.
so that's,
Yeah, you
it's,
gotta.
Like, I'm saying, like, even as a town of 30, how many registered electors do we have? And how many voted in this last election, do you remember?
About 20,000.
Like 1700.
17, I think it was 17,000, yeah.
So 17,000, and even 1% is what, 1,700?
That's
Or
170.
170. So,
Even
like,
that's
that's pushing
you're
it.
right in the air, in the area we were talking earlier, 75, 100.
Yeah.
That seems like you want people to want this, to not just go to,
Right.
you know, their
Their
drinking buddies and their
friends.
neighbors,
Yeah.
but not so high that
Right.
it's.
It shouldn't be a full-time job to get signatures.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it shouldn't be a full-time job to count them and verify them.
how long did it take for each of you guys to get your signatures?
I went up and down my street.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had mine
A
in
weekend.
probably, 2 days or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Just 3 days and
I
maybe
was-
spent like 2 hours a day on it.
So that's, was it
25.
30, was it 25, 30?
It was
25
25.
It was 25, so I got
So you gotta
30,
work a
so-
little harder to get to the 100, so
Yeah.
that's maybe reasons.
Yes. But I think we're all in agreement that Boulder is completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
On most things.
You only got 10,000 signatures?
10%, wow.
Recall's 20%.
I did
That's-
see there was a lot of recall provision. Is there a current recall provision for Erie?
It's a statutory one.
Statutory, okay.
Yeah, it's also,
What is the number for a recall petition?
It's a percent of
Okay.
the voters who voted in the last election.
Because I know a couple of them had like, I think they were 20% for recalls or 10% for referendums and initiatives and things like that. Like, what are the current statutory levels for those things, like referendums or are they even allowed under statutory?
Yeah, they are, and there are current statutory limits, and then there's also kind of a constitutional backstop that you can't violate. I would suggest when we're at those topics that we would,
Okay.
because I'm not completely conversant in what those percentages are at the
That's
moment, but yeah, that's definitely something to consider is where you tinker with those and what you accomplish by tinkering with them.
for an initiative in Eagle, it's 10% of registered electors, which is pretty high.
That's as high as you can go under the Constitution.
Okay, so you
So
can't
anything else
require
would
more
be
than 10.
But that's really,
Mead and it's,
yeah.
I think Chelsea, you were gonna speak up to yours.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I agree with Bob that to me the kind of the most important thing is adopting like a high quality, like basic framework that will be widely accepted. So we have the opportunity to enable our council or board to do things. I don't wanna waste the opportunity and not even get to empower them in the first place by, getting into the minutia of anything we don't have to.
Right.
Is kind of where my mind is.
We were addressed by CIRSA at one point in time about home rule. Multiple times CIRSA or CML came out and talked to the board of trustees about home rule. And one thing that really stuck in my mind, Tammy from CIRSA, what's Tammy's last name?
Tanny Tenoy.
What is this?
So it's the insurance agency that insures municipalities. Is that a good enough description? So they have an interest in the way a town sets things up to be run because they have to ensure that, and that's sometimes difficult to do. But one of the things that she said to me, or to us, sorry, is what your home rule charter should say is a preamble, and then it should be your signatures. Like nothing. They don't say anything because you get yourself out from underneath the statutory restrictions, but then let the electeds make policy and make changes as necessary. I don't know if I agree with her 100%, but
Yeah.
her point was, her point was made.
It would make this a lot easier.
So we're done then.
Excellent.
Which definitely means you need to make the provisions to make it a little bit harder to be elected, like you
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah,
And we gotta build in the recall provisions and all of that stuff.
There's enough work, yeah, so.
I think the Castle Pines charter adheres to that, keeping it as simple as possible. The Eagle one adds a few more provisions, and there are others that add a lot more.
I know, like in the Eagle one, I think there were specific lines where they were saying this is designed specifically to exempt us from CRS this. And it's like, and it had a CRS number.
They had too many lawyers on that charter.
What's interesting is Eagle has 13 articles and Castle Pines has 14, so.
We can make as many articles as we want.
Yeah, I know, but we were talking about,
Numbering is.
it's really not that much different. I thought it was
One
more.
cat per house.
One cat per house, that's gonna be a different article.
Eagles is 30 pages.
Minimum.
Lisa, we haven't heard from you?
I've just been sitting here trying to think about the best way to verbalize, I guess, kind of where I'm sitting from. I think for me, the biggest thing that I am very passionate about is the representation side of things.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Being, I think, the only person here from Old Town. There's a reason that we chose to live in Old Town. There's a reason that we continue to live in Old Town. And so for me, I find it really frustrating that there's not a lot of representation from Old Town in things like this or the town board or very many of the other committees. So I think for me, and I have to be completely honest, I don't know what that would look like. I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know. But for me, I think the biggest thing I'm the most passionate about is representation.
So wards or things like that.
So
Yeah, I have a question on that too, because I have a friend who actually lives in the gray area between Boulder and here, and she said she couldn't vote on Erie local matters or Broomfield. She's just off
She's
floating
an
out.
They're
Brownfield.
Yeah.
She's unincorporated, she can't.
They're not part of the town of Erie, they can't vote on town of Erie issues.
Yeah.
So you can
get
tinker
free
with that if you want.
Well,
we can tinker with that?
You can, yeah, you can allow more people to vote in your, you probably can't limit who votes beyond saying you have to be a Town of Erie registered elector. But you could allow other people, you can allow anyone.
Anyone in the state of Colorado.
Any
can
registered
vote.
voter in the state of Colorado.
Everybody with a cat?
I mean, I would almost look at that and say, what about the business owners in this town that don't live in this town? They should have a say. So it's something we could talk about for sure. Not something we have to talk about right now, but just.
Yeah, a lot of places add voters based on property ownership. It's a common concept in special districts. And so if you're a property owner, you get a vote. I don't know that a municipality's done that, but one of the mountain towns has done that. Because they have a lot of out-of-state property owners. It's not Vail, but it's, yeah.
Is it not?
I think it definitely makes
Boulder
sense
is
for
like
them though.
50% not residents, right?
Nobody lives
Have
there.
a provision like that? Let's see. What would
But I
that,
agree, I think that Old Town needs some representation too.
so
My
like,
brother
yeah,
lives in
there were different like warded and districted systems,
That's, I think on wards and districts, that's, the one part I struggle with is the process of redrawing those, because I agree with you, and I've agreed with you, or agreed with that idea that Old Town's underrepresented. And it had me thinking years ago, how do you do this? Do you divide it on county line and say, have 2 from that side, 2 from that side, 1 from Old Town, and the rest at large?
Yeah.
But how do you redraw that every
As
10 years
population
as the
grows.
population shifts? I mean, when Parkdale gets built, how many houses is that gonna be? I mean, that's a huge shift that way, and so.
It's a process, and I've gone through that both at the county level and in Louisville. Every time there's a census, then you essentially hire a consultant to help you do the math and figure out roughly where you want the boundaries to go. It's not as complicated as redistricting on the state level or as prone to gerrymandering, but it requires some work every 10 years
So, and cost.
and cost. But it's
A simple way would just be to draw it on the county lines, you know, X representation from each county and then everyone else at large.
Yeah, but if
That's
it's in
not-
50 years,
That's not.
But that's,
that's-
you
So
can make it
there's no guarantee that the counties are gonna change in 50 years.
not the
No, but they're
county's
not equitable.
population shift.
Yeah,
Oh,
but if
right.
you make
Or
it,
get
now it's
built on
twice
the
as
Will
many
County
people
side.
involved.
the
But I
Boulder
think that
County
we would
side,
wanna do
so-
it as like a percentage, right? So like if there's, so you draw your quarters, you divide the town up into quarters, Old Town gets their own separate ward. And then as you hit percentages of population, then that ward now has 2 that they can run.
So you're expanding council size?
Cause then your council size would change.
Yeah.
Well, it should change with population increase. To a
Well, so
certain
doesn't
extent.
Broomfield do that? Does Broomfield do that? They have specific districts that are population based, aren't they? And they have additional, specific representation. And they add to it, don't they?
I'm not familiar with Broomfield, but in Louisville, they have wards, and every 10 years, they adjust the wards to have roughly equal population in each ward. And takes a little bit of time, it takes some math, it takes a consultant, it probably costs $50,000 every 10 years, so it's not huge.
And not a bunch of weird wonky looking lines.
No.
I mean, we can write that into the charter as to prevent any sort of gerrymandering or a council picking their own voters sort of method.
That's just what I was struggling with. Is it just, is
Right.
it easier just to keep it at large? Or do we complicate things and try to better
Well, and
represent
often
areas?
there's both, often there's like one representative from each ward and then several
And
at
then a
large
large,
members.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, and
So that's the piece you would establish, like in the charter is
And I mean,
the
if we
split,
wanna
the
keep
split
it
of
like,
the.
if we wanna keep it proportional, that's what we would wanna do, is like you get a county line breakdown and both sides have their percentage, and that can shift based on population. And then, one for Old Town, and then at large per county sort of thing.
but I don't know if we have to have it by county, only because there are gonna be some subdivisions that cross county line road at some point, I
So-
would expect.
Yeah,
The one
but-
you're talking about, how is
That's
it
fine.
written, like to where it has flexibility to kind of redo every 10 years? Do they even get into details about counties and so on?
Probably
or do they
just language about proportional
very-
representation.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm not
one
sure
So
if
yeah.
you would count counties.
Yeah,
The
Yeah.
thing is, like, we're kind of in a unique position as far as 2 counties, right? Cause Broomfield used to be 3 and they turned into their own county because of it.
Right.
And so if that might be one of the areas where we're treading new ground, is how do we handle going home rule as we bridge 2 counties with very different forms of government and, methodology.
Longmont does it. They're,
Who do they bridge?
it's
Both county
Boulder.
and Boulder County.
Boulder, well,
Do they do a third or do they not? Larimer, or is that,
I don't think Longmont reaches Larimer.
No, they're
No,
on.
they don't.
what's the next one north?
Larimer.
That's-
Larimer,
okay.
yeah.
But they don't make it up
Fort
then.
Collins is Larimer.
Okay.
Did Broomfield go home rule while they were still part of 3 counties before they turned into Broomfield County?
I think there were 5
I think
counties.
they were
However many there were.
before.
Oh, do you? I thought they did all once, but I don't remember.
yeah, just
Right.
Boulder.
But they definitely went charter.
Because 66 is.
Charter county to address that issue with multiple counties within the same jurisdiction. And that's a lot more involved.
Yeah, I was reading about that process a little bit, where you have to get buy-off from both counties, plus the state, and plus your own voters.
Yeah.
I do know like districts or wards definitely needs to be a thing, cause that's
Yeah,
what Lisa ran on and that's what people
And yeah,
voted
no,
her
she
for,
got a lot.
and that's half the reason I decided to go on this journey too, is cause I wanted representation for certain parts of town without a bunch of white collar professionals and any of these being able to just kinda, figure out how they want things read. We need people like Lisa and
so where would that
me
fall
and
under?
Candace,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where would that fall under?
Elections.
Under election.
Election, so meeting 3. So we've got some time for that, but everyone should start doing their
One week.
homework on that.
Right.
Right now, well, no, it's, next week is
2
not.
weeks, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
2 weeks. But that'll be a big,
Christmas. Oh, no,
So
that meeting
Leslie,
was
general
before.
conference, the
Sorry,
no, we've got
Which county
two
is it?
meetings.
Or which county?
Eighth
Which
and
local
15th.
authority is
Yeah.
it?
So we've
The-
got two meetings,
The
we'll
method
reach
you were
elections
talking
before
about
we
is
break.
in, just to be able to read how they were, Lewis Hills like that, okay,
We'll do it by ward.
okay.
The mayor is elected at large, and then I have 3 wards, 2 council members each.
North Glen has it that way as well.
So about
Wanna take notes?
meetings,
My phone, I forgot my laptop.
we're planning on getting through meeting 1 and 2. There's what, 11 meetings on this agenda? So
Yeah.
we're meeting weekly.
Yeah, so we're gonna,
At
we'll do what we
first,
can,
until
we'll
we
see
get
what
a-
we get next week, if we don't, if we
Set
only
the
make it through.
expectation. Okay.
Yeah,
We have a goal at least, and we'll
if
see.
we only make it through general provisions next week, that's all we do, and then we'll shift for the next week.
Yeah.
Ideally, I would love to cap our, like, these at 2 hours.
Yeah.
So we have
I go to
180
bed usually by 8, guys.
Being in meetings at midnight is not fun.
Yeah, I wanna do that.
I've definitely done
You
that.
start just pushing stuff through.
Yeah,
I approve.
And we have 180 days from today, right? We have 180 days from today, or
From the
from
election.
the election.
May 7th is our due date?
May 7th is a Sunday,
Yeah.
so May 5th.
May 5th, that's right, you had that
Working
email.
on that last week.
Right.
So,
Well,
Okay.
I definitely think more meetings is better. I've helped write
Yeah.
a master plan and, we definitely could have benefited from more meetings,
Yeah.
so.
Alright, so we'll stick with the weekly cadence for now, we'll try to stick as close to 2 hours as possible, and I'll try to cap us at that, just so we don't start rambling for too long. Big picture for next week, we've got our 2 topics on the agenda. Everyone has, I think elections and figuring out our ward system will be a really complex topic, so we may wanna delay that one till after our holiday break, but everyone should start looking into that and figuring out what we want that to look like for Erie,
so
because
we have 23, sorry, go ahead.
I just say that'll be one of our the most complex things we set up, so.
And
that'll be-
are we allowed to do subcommittees?
You can, with the consent of the body, and if it's 3 of you, then it needs to be posted as a meeting.
Because it may be something like that, it's worth having people get together to draft a proposal.
Let's see how it goes.
I mean, there's 23 weeks between now and then.
Is
I
that,
just counted.
are you taking out the?
No, I haven't taken
So
those out, but
take 3 out.
say we take 6 out, it's still
Good enough.
17,
That's,
and this talked about 11, so
sounds
it's
good.
50%.
Yeah, yeah. And there's other days in the week too.
Yeah, there are, so,
And per your recommendation, Malcolm, we would like to request your assistance for next week.
I'd be happy to hear.
And Debbie, would you be available for us as well?
Absolutely.
it'd be really good to get this started. This was a good meeting.
Alright, so per agenda, do we have any other topics we wanna hit before we wrap up?
None, I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded, alright.
Well, yes,
All in favor?
So the chair can just adjourn, you don't have to go
Okay.
through all that.
Okay.
If you want to, you can, but